Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. Today I am joined by John Hughes and Paddy Sinnott. Kevin Graham is not going to be with us today, sadly, but he will be back in the hot seat next week. Next week, Wednesday, that's in between Christmas and New Year, it's fine, he will be back. We will be playing our single. John and Paddy, you guys were part of the push for the Charity Weekender. You're aware of the song. It's doing really, really well. It's been as high as number 16 in the main chart, and obviously we'll keep pushing it all week. Who knows where it can go. It's just a phenomenal song, and it's great that people are buying it for the right reasons. We'll play that for you at some point during the show, but let's talk about Celtic first. I know that's why all the commenters tune in. They want to talk about our team. There's plenty happening. There's plenty happened that we'll chat about. Obviously, we've got ticket allocations at Ibrox. We've got the second half of a season. We've got Livingston and loads of transfer gossip as well. But first and foremost, you two have not, on A Celtic State of Mind anyway, had an opportunity to talk about the weekend's game, the Aberdeen match, the victory, the fact that they parked the bus. I'll come to you first, John. They parked the bus in classic SPFL style, but I wouldn't have expected it from Aberdeen at Pittodrie, John.
Well, I mean, I sort of written down during it, pragmatic or pathetic, cautious or cowardly was in my notes, and I'm a very pragmatic person, so I'm sort of conflicted. Obviously, you can see what he was doing, and it nearly worked, to be fair. It nearly worked. You can see what he was doing. He is trying to protect his job. He's trying to get his team the most number of points. He decided that the best way to play against us was not to play at all, and display the very little seen 8-0-2 formation. So that's fair enough. That's his prerogative to do that. And I understand that from a pragmatic point of view. From a football point of view, it is woeful. From a product point of view, it is disgraceful. From a vision and courage point of view, it is outrageously poor. I understand the pragmatism, but have some testicular fortitude. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely, show some
testicular fortitude. Yes, I will be using that. I'll be claiming that as my own, John. That's brilliant.
I'm telling you, that's a cracker.
But the absolute the lack of ambition. Look, it's not his job to worry about Scottish football overall. It's not his job to worry about the Sky deal. His job is to sort out his team. So I understand it. I understand they have a lot less resources than we do. I do understand it, but it was so abysmal to watch. And here, they didn't do it last night.
No.
They ended up losing anyway, but they didn't do it last night because they obviously decided that was not the way to play against them. So, it turns out they'd been better off playing that way against them. But, it was, we all know, it was an awful game to watch. And the consequences of that, from our point of view, I said at halftime in the live chat, which I just thought we were pedestrian and predictable, and we were. And it's because when you see things like people lauding Callum McGregor for having 174 odd passes, more than the entire team, that's fantastic. But that is indicative of a problem. The problem is everything is going through him. Every touch of the ball is going through him. Your forwards, your Jotas, and your Maidas, all the rest of it, had barely a kick. So people going on about Kyogo, I mean, the chances we made were few and far between, to be fair. But, I mean, it was an awful, awful watch. And it just feels to me like we were talking about the weekend, Paul, about certain players like Tommy Burns and stuff like that, and the advent of the new firm. Aberdeen used to be a great side.
Yeah.
A great side with a proud history. And this, perhaps it's an acceptance of the reality of the financial situation. But for the love of God, man, do something, show some ambition. St Mirren, they deployed much the same tactics, but their two big guys up front were able to hold the ball up. The Aberdeen players weren't able to do that. Everything was easily swallowed up by Carter Vickers and Starfelt, who did really well with the limited work that they had to do. But it was such a disappointing spectacle. It sort of depressed you, not from the point of view of, we were in so much control of that game, it was almost tedious, and the way we were playing was fairly tedious because, the patterns were developing. The patterns of passing were developing constantly, and they were always the same, so from, Ralston to McGregor to Taylor, blah, 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 and it was just like this. So, O'Reilly and back again to McGregor, and, Hatate and back again to McGregor. And, so it was very difficult. And it's also difficult. You don't want to overly criticise the players. What are you supposed to do about that? Those tactics are designed to nullify better players. That's what they're there for. When you are playing that deep, you make the difference between a £5 million player and a £1 million player marginal, absolutely marginal. So that's what they're obviously trying to do, and it does work to an extent. They were a few minutes away from getting away with it, but glorious return from Callum McGregor. What a strike! What a layoff from the another man that made it into the conversation at the weekend for nearly 500 appearances. James Forrest comes on, running the show. lovely layoff. And Abada was great. They weren't. Sorry to just write. Well, one final thing. Someone pointed out to me, he's not a better player than Jota. I don't see it. Blah blah blah. It's not about better. It's about different.
Yeah.
It's about bringing something different, and we really needed something different. And to me, we needed it earlier than we got it. I thought the substitutions were quite slow to an extent. But anyway, that's my main thoughts on it, Paul.
No, but some of the points you made there, John, I would like to expand on them a wee bit. Firstly, the wingers, the situation with the wingers, whereby obviously there's been two changes made, and I'll throw this over to yourself, Paddy. James comes on, makes a real impact. Abada came on, really made an impact in the second half. Everything basically was channeled through him. And I know that the statisticians amongst us will be aware of the systems used and utilised for data analysis. And part of that, John, is passing between particular players. So when you watch it's almost like a heat map, and the line between Starfelt and Carter Vickers is often a very solid red line because the passing's going back and forward. And then, McGregor and oftentimes O'Reilly come in a wee bit deeper to get the passing. And what would have been really obvious to anyone analysing those charts would be that the fact that we weren't breaking the lines, Paddy, to the wingers. So you weren't getting Carter Vickers and Starfelt, missing out the midfield and going to, in the first half, Jota and Maeda, and then in the second half, Forrest and Abada. And it sounds like a simple change in direction, but often that is how to get the opposition on the back foot. But I think the biggest impact and the biggest reason we were able to break them down eventually was down to the fact that Forrest and Abada came on and made a massive impact.
No, exactly. And I think Ange, he kind of alluded to it yesterday at the press conference. The reason why he made the half-time change for Maeda to Abada was because there just wasn't any space. There was no space for Maeda to make any of those kind of runs that he makes. It needed somebody to unlock or to break through those ranks. Those, what was it, a bank of 5 and a bank of 4 that Aberdeen played? Or was it I don't know. But it definitely, there was no space for Maeda. It needed somebody just to kind of open the game up a wee bit. And that's what Abada did when he came on. The guy's he's quick, but he's also tricky. Mm-hmm. He knows how to beat a man. He can ghost by players. How often do we see him ghosting on that right flank and catching defenders out? But no, I agree with that. The changes made, although at least Ange took it and he made that change early for Abada and Maeda. Normally you would tend to wait to the 55th, 60th minute, but at half time he thought it's not working. And the change he made, Abada was one of the best players on the pitch, and he was only on for 45 minutes. That itself tells you exactly the story of the game. And to a certain extent, I kind of look at it a bit differently for John. I understand why Aberdeen set up that. We understand that they've got a job to do. They need to stop us attacking them. But that wasn't the remit that Jim Goodwin was brought into to Aberdeen. He was brought in to bring that attacking football. He said when he was hired, he was wanting to close the gap between Celtic and Rangers at the top of the table. You're not going to close anything playing that kind of football. You're not going to get anywhere near any of us playing that kind of football. And when you look at the form of Aberdeen before they came to face us, they were in a decent run of form, and they were playing decent football as well. I just think if they played that kind of style at Celtic Park, I'm not got an issue with that at all, because we all know that's what teams come to Celtic Park and play. They play that kind of style of football, but at home, in front of your own fans, I just think it's the worst game of football I can remember in the past 2 seasons since Ange Postecoglou took over. Teams are now the teams now know the kind of style of football we play, and now they're taking. I don't know if I want to say steps to nullify it, because that wasn't a step to nullify it. That was just a whole. That was they built a wall on Saturday afternoon. It wasn't even. They didn't even attack. They didn't even attempt to attack. I think they had one shot and it was even on target. For a home team, for a team like Aberdeen, it's just not good enough. But I mean, I'm looking at it, I suppose, obviously from a Celtic point of view. But if I was an Aberdeen fan, I would have been, and for what I can see on social media, a lot of them weren't very happy about the tactics that were set out on Saturday against us.
Yeah, for sure. Now, a couple of wee bits there. Firstly, you're talking about from a Celtic perspective, and we speak from a Celtic state of mind. But on Saturday, we had a couple of Aberdeen fans in for part of the pre-match preparation, and they were buoyant. They were talking about the attacking flair of their side, particularly at home. So I get what you mean there, because they've completely changed tact. And I didn't even see 75 minutes in them then saying, right, let's go back to what we've been doing for the last 6 weeks at home and then try and get us on the back foot. I didn't see that at all. The other thing, and I keep throwing this in, it's a bugbear of quite a few of us, and I think JP and I have spoken about it quite a bit with regards to allocation in away grounds. And the argument that Alan Burrows has previously made is it's all about building up your own home support and all this kind of stuff. Well, on the one hand, you're not giving us enough tickets, and on the other hand, the product that you're putting in front of your own fans is absolutely murder to watch. So it flew in the face of that. But it's a nice bit of linkage into ticket allocations elsewhere that we'll talk about. The other thing I was going to say, we chose for the first time in 2 years to do a watch-along, Kevin McCluskey and I, and it just so happened to be one of the worst games of football in those 2 years as well. Honestly, you're sitting there thinking, what are we going to talk about now? Do we have Joe Beltrami interviews? Right, I'll play them.
Yeah, I'll tell you another thing, Paul, you were miles behind as well.
Oh,
I'd already typed a couple of things out, and I was going to say, still not seen that goal.
That's the worst part about it. I mean, It was the Ferencváros game a couple of years back. I won't have to tell you which one I'm talking about, where it was down to one game, obviously, in Europe for obvious reasons, and we were murdered. But we were doing that game, watching the Pass to Paradise whilst doing it, whilst we were all locked down, and people were texting us when the goals were going in. And we're still sitting watching the official stream, and it was horrendous. And that was the reason we didn't do it since then. Talking of passes to paradise and that kind of stuff, I'm breaking away for a moment. I'm going to get back to the football chat, in case you're wondering. We get a lot of really nice gestures on a Celtic State of Mind, and I know it's easy to focus on some of the toxicity out there on social media and stuff like that. But today, I received this, right? Now, it may not instantly look like anything Celtic related, right? But there are 12 singles here. For any of the younger viewers, a single was something that was on a thing called vinyl, which looked like that. And you couldn't download it to your phone. And these are actually from Kevin McDermott, who is from the Kevin McDermott Orchestra, who, came to fruition back in the 1980s and the 90s alongside bands like Del Amitri. And Kevin McDermott's been a good friend to a Celtic State of Mind. And this song, Everything Is Over, was used in the Henrik Larsson DVD that Celtic produced. The Boy Who Would Be King, I think it was called. And this song played out the DVD. So Kevin thought, these are doing fundraising, I'm going to send these out to you, and they're all signed. So we've got a dozen of them. We've been playing it on on the decks, on the turntable. That's a record player where you put a little needle into the groove, ladies and
I don't even
gents.
think half of them know what a CD player is either. Never mind a record player.
It's brilliant. I love it. I mean, that sound of the static just before the song comes in, it's still special. Yeah. So thank you to Kevin McDermott. These are some of the things that happen at a Celtic State of Mind that we do want to shout from the rooftops, because it's just about being kind. So they're going to form part of the auction that we're planning. Some of these items behind me are going to be part of that. This here, you might have seen this before. This is that book of newspaper headlines involving Celtic, and that was also sent to us by someone who follows us on the Twitter page. Just out of the goodness of their heart, it goes by the name Gino Ginelli, and it's just, these people are just being kind and they're sending stuff to us that we could potentially keep in the studio or use as part of the auction. So thank you all so much for that. We will be playing the record at some point today, because we are pushing it as much as we can. As I say, we were at number 16 above the likes of Mariah Carey and Ed Sheeran and all they guys. We've dropped down a wee bit because other things have happened in the world of music. So big shout out to Martin Duffy, who passed away unfortunately and sadly untimely. He was indeed a member of Primal Scream, one of my favourite bands of all time, just 55 years of age. And on the same day, Terry Hall from the Specials also passed away. And let's not forget Ian Templeton, the drummer of another couple of my favourite bands, The Laz and Shaq. They all died on the same day. So thoughts and prayers with all their friends and family on today. We'll get back to the music a little later. I want to bring in some of the comments. Urban Culture is feeling really confident tonight. 4-0 win, 5 subs used, no injuries. I would like a wee bit of that. If you're going to be at the game, or if you're going to tune in on Celtic TV stream, official of course, keep your ears peeled. Is that right? Keep your ears to the ground. No, keep your eyes peeled, that's what it is. Keep your ears to the ground. Because that was a classic Kevin Graham. I know I'm sitting in Kevin Graham's seat here. Because the song The Glory and the Dream will be played tonight at Celtic Park. Thank you to everyone at the club for organising that, and particularly to JP Taylor for getting the ball rolling. When the ball ricocheted off two Gers players' hands, we're talking about a game last night, before they scored, should definitely have been looked at by VAR. Almost identical. I know that there's been a lot of this over the last couple of weeks in relation to our nearest challengers, and I get it, because it is going to come back in the conversation as we move throughout the season. We're going to concentrate on the Celtic for today. Danielle comes in. I'm sick of talking about them now. It happened last night, and we'll continue. Focus on us, like Anne says. Absolutely. And, there will, I'm sure, be occasions where we need to talk about VAR decisions and refereeing decisions involving Celtic. So, I mean, I've seen some of the decisions last weekend in the game against Hibs, and I disagree with them. But we're concentrating on getting the win tonight. We will be talking about ticket allocation, though, talking about some of the empty seats at Pittodrie. We, John, are given 708 tickets for the upcoming spectacle at Ibrox on the 2nd of January. That scenario should have been put to bed by now, but it doesn't look as though it's going to be. What's your thoughts? I mean, it's just rumbling on now, isn't it?
Yeah, my thoughts are, first and foremost, Paul, I think just take a wee second away from that to say, fantastic job you did the week. I thought that was ordinary, the amount of effort you put in to make that thing amazing, mate. So hats off to you. That was incredible and still ongoing. And on that note as well, you see that the Celtic Foundation have raised £385,000 in their charity appeal for their Christmas appeal, more than ever, in the face of people being absolutely skint more than ever. So what a club, and the people that support the club like yourself, hats off to you all for making these things happen. Absolutely extraordinary. So as for the tickets, yeah, I suppose I was one of those who said, hell mend them. And I don't care. I know that, but I don't want to take it away from like the real diehards that want to go there and have pee thrown on them from, the stand above and all that sort of thing. 700 tickets. 700 tickets isn't so much that's not a fan allocation. That's an expeditionary force into enemy territory. That's really I can't see how that would be enjoyable. I wouldn't even attempt to go myself because I just think that would be an absolute nightmare. And I know the guys, a lot of our guys love it and would want to be there. I don't see the point of it myself, and I certainly don't see the point in having, the equivalent number of them at our ground. It's just a nonsense. And the only reason we're even still doing this is because nobody wants to be seen to be the final one that just goes, I tell you what, let's just wrap this because it's garbage. So nobody wants to be seen to be the one that put the nail in the coffin. But it's just a joke. It's a joke. I mean, what sort of atmosphere are you generating with a few guys in the corners who are just, mainly taking cover from stuff that's been thrown at them? So I don't see the point of it. It should have been the problem is people say we need to be the bigger club, we need to be the adults, we need to be the grown-ups in the room. That's all right, but we're dealing with toddlers, or people who are pandering to angry toddlers. It's not, if they're seen to back down, their own fans will go through them. It's one of these situations that I don't want to take it away from our own supporters who want to go, but at the same time, I don't see the point. I would just, give them nothing until they give us something decent. I would just take it away from them completely until they give us something decent. And there are consequences to that. There are, the atmosphere was one of the big things for the broadcasters. I still think you get a decent atmosphere, but is it just as quite? It's more of a choir type effect than it is, the sort of the inbuilt aggression that you get at football games. That sort of tribal, chanting back and forward. So I understand it's a big miss, but this is just a joke, and it's just allowing everyone to plaster over the cracks. That's all it's doing. It's just allowing everyone to say, look, it's all right, that's fine, we don't need to talk about that anymore, because we've got our allocation. It's not good enough. It's just not good enough. And the people that should be stepping in are the SFA.
Yes.
This is the, this is our supposedly our blue ribboned, event, as it were. This is the major event in the sporting football calendar for Scottish football, and they won't allow any number of away fans. How does that make sense? So I don't know. Michael Beale might want to take some of the brown brogues and suits he's got the boys wearing and march them up to the brown brogues and suits that are in the SFA and have a chat with them about, maybe sorting out the allocation. But it's just, to me, it's just a nonsense. Sorry, I'm ranting again. Paddy, what do you make of it, mate?
Nah, listen, I think in terms of the atmosphere that's generated in the stadium, I think the last Glasgow derby we had at Celtic Park put that to bed. I mean, that atmosphere was tremendous. Now, obviously, that was a night-time game, wasn't it, when we beat them that night, and that obviously lended to the atmosphere, but it should be all or nothing. All or nothing. You either go back to the old allocation or we just get nothing at all. I'm with you, John. I think that allocation is just... I wouldn't want to sit in that corner of that stadium, like you say, getting hit with all sorts of vitriol and nonsense for 90 minutes, because that's what it would be. It would just be constant abuse and you're sitting there huddled in that wee corner. Mm-hmm. It doesn't appeal to me, and I take my hat off to the guys that actually go and do that. I think... and it won't change. It simply won't change because nobody wants to lose face, and that's it. I can't see Rangers biting the bullet and going, right, let's get it back to the full stand. And I certainly can't see us doing that unless there's some sort of leeway or some sort of give there. But I don't see it. It's been how long now? If you don't count the COVID season, it's been 2 seasons, almost 2 seasons now with this allocation nonsense of 3 seasons. So, I don't think it's going to change. And
ironically, can I just add in there? Ironically, the one season where they actually won something was a season there wasn't any fans, and now we're back to pumping them anyway.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I don't know. I just think all or nothing. And if they're hitting us with 700 and whatever 8 tickets, Celtic should just send them back. Say, look, it's insulting. It's actually insulting when you look at it that way. And either if the SFA don't step in, somebody's got to make a change. Somebody's going to have to kind of go the bigger set and make the first step. I can't see it being us, and it certainly won't be. Won't be them.
Are we talking testicular fortitude again, Paddy?
Well, I didn't want to steal his patter. I'm hoping to bring some different patter to the podcast. So,
superb.
If you give me a minute, I'll think of something worse.
I mean, it is a situation. I'll go to one of the points you made there, John, about, listen, we're football fans, so we don't think about product. We think about the team you're supporting, and you get involved in the emotion of that. But there are people employed in high-powered and high-paid jobs within Scottish football who have to protect the brand of the game. And the big thing that they've always done is they've lumped Celtic and Rangers into this joint kind of headed monster that they then sell to sponsors and broadcasters. Now, it's difficult enough, even with the two big clubs in Scotland, to get sponsors, because they've struggled to find sponsors, particularly for some of the cups. Scottish Cup should always have a big sponsorship deal. It's not always been the case. And I think that if you have a situation like this and you fail to deal with it, and like you say, John, it could affect the spectacle in terms of a broadcastable, sellable brand, then you're not doing your job. Now, Celtic are in an impossible position because they've been faced with this and they can't just bend over. So it does, I think, require now the authorities to come in and sort it out.
Well, it always did. It always did. And it should have been dealt with immediately. Immediately the first time they said, no, we're only giving you 700 or we're only giving you 800 or, whatever it was. The first time they did it, that should have been stamped on straight away. The SFA should have been right in there and said, no, that's not happening. Not in this game. Mm-hmm. So it was always for the authorities to step in, because as you say, and it's the same thing we were talking about with the Aberdeen manager earlier on, his job is not necessarily to look after the product. That's the SFA. They're supposed to be looking after the product. They're supposed to be looking after the brand. They're supposed to be selling. Is it any wonder we can't get a TV deal?
I know.
You can't get opposition fans into the ground on your biggest fixture. You can't get opposition fans into the ground on that. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense. And then, again, especially in view of the likes of, we're trying to sell this product. You've got the likes of what Godwin did there, which is just anti-football. Most of the games against us are anti-football. You get people, those games are on Sky. People from all around the world could be tuning into that. And it's this anti-football that we're playing. It's dreary. It's a drudge. And so the only game really where two teams are likely to play any football is Celtic and Rangers. That's the only game where you're definite that they're not just going to dig in; they're going to come out and play. Mm-hmm. So, and in that game, there's no opposition fans. I mean, I'm pretty sure there are in fact rules. I'm sure someone's going to dig into the rule book now and prove me wrong, but they're not rules already there which can be enforced, which should be enforced.
I think there's a rule for minimum amount of ticketing for away fans. I can't remember exactly what percentage it is, but I'm sure when this first kicked in, I think it was Rangers. They went to the absolute minimum that they could have went to for, and they used the rule. I don't know if it's changed. I don't know if 708 does meet that requirement or does meet that minimum requirement.
Well, it would make sense. It would make sense as to why
there's a definite rule there. But I agree with you. I don't think the SFA have got a backbone, to be fair, to try and sort this out. Could you imagine them trying to take on two of the biggest clubs in Scotland over this? I can't see it, because then they would probably be accused of taking sides, of one club over the other. But
they're not even taking on two clubs, Paddy. They're taking on one club.
True.
Celtic would happily go back to the way it was, I think. Celtic don't have any problem. It's just the fact that they can't be seen to be, letting their fans suffer and letting the Rangers fans benefit. So, they're not taking on two clubs. It's one club. And, why aren't they taking them on? Oh, God, I don't know why. It's a mystery. Why don't we ask all the ex-Rangers officials that are in the SFA why they're not taking them on?
Whatever could you mean, John? Whatever could you mean?
I'm sure it's coincidental, but you would hope that your governing body would deal with this situation. It's not as if they've got a ton of things to deal with. This is pretty basic stuff. In fact, it's the most basic stuff. Your best game, the game that everybody watches, you're guaranteed is going to get eyes on it, and you're not allowing away fans in. It's just, to me, it's pretty depressing when you look at the Scottish football as a whole, that our governing body is so incompetent and so impotent. And is it any wonder we end up with these shocking TV deals? The other leagues take the same amount of money per game, and it's just it's completely unacceptable in terms of the lack of them doing their jobs. It's pathetic.
Yeah, it is, John. And by the way, it's not ranting. It's not ranting. Get it out. Keep it coming. And it leads us quite nicely on to Ange Postecoglou continues to destroy the lazy narrative, and that is in reference to him continuously being asked similar style questions, particularly in press conferences, where he's actually spoke out about it to say that we're not the same entity. We are a completely different club. We are nothing like Rangers, is what Ange has been saying. And it comes to the point, I think the frustration in Ange Postecoglou has been building for some time, Paddy. Yeah. And by the way, I don't think he's ever given anybody an easy ride of it since he came to the club. If he's unhappy with a line of questioning, he is more than able to pick them up for it. What did you make of Ange's comments? And he's 100% right. And in many ways, it's along the same lines that we've been talking about. It's not about both clubs, it's about one club.
I thought they were brilliant. And what I did like about that as well is he actually had a dig at the rest of the managers for going along with it as well. He's been alluding to this since the Champions League campaign, when we were kind of going for it, we set up our team to attack in the Champions League. The other team set up their team to defend. But somehow we were getting lumped in with this complete reported failure. The Scottish clubs in Europe.
Yeah, yep.
And that annoyed him a lot. And I think it's been bubbling since then. And obviously the line of questioning yesterday has annoyed him to even named certain managers in the league that follow the narrative, like Jim, and he took a wee pop at David Martindale as well. He's another one that follows that kind of answer, those kind of questions. The thing I love about Ange is he doesn't care. He'll speak his mind, and if there's something that irks him or something that annoys him, he'll let you know about it. But he does it with class and humility. When you watch the press conference yesterday, that was a guy that was measured. He was calm. He spoke his mind, but it came across in a way that made people sit up and listen. And when you look at the way it's been reported, the media read a report this morning, and obviously one of the first things that Ange Postecoglou says was he pointed the finger at the media and says, "You guys drive this," but it was put in the very last column in a piece. I can't remember which article it was. I think it was a Herald or something. That quote was put in the very last column. I was like, well, that's clever, isn't it? You can sit and talk about how Ange is talking about a narrative in Scottish football, when it's actually he's having a dig at the media. He's having a dig at the media and how they're lumping us in with Rangers, and how they lump each other in with everybody else. I thought it was brilliant. I loved it, and I actually wrote about it today, and how he took that question, turned it into a way that the media need to look at themselves and try and. We are individual. We are a totally different club. Like Ange says, St Johnstone, Livingston tonight will be a different challenge for Aberdeen. They'll probably set up around about the same way, but it'll be a completely different challenge. And to lump everybody in with the same kind of narrative, it's lazy, it's boring, and I'm glad he called it out.
Yeah, it seems to me, John, you've got someone coming into the Scottish game, and it's like what you were saying there. If you're told something or something exists long enough and it becomes the norm, and then people stop questioning it because it's the norm, and just come in with his eyes wide open, he's thinking, what is this all about? I mean, we're Celtic, and, he says one thing I found interesting, if he was to treat Livingston like St Johnstone, then it would be deemed disrespectful. If he was to treat all the other 10 clubs the same way, it would be deemed disrespectful. And I do think it is about time that, you know, there was a line drawn in the sand, and I think Ange is continually trying to do that, John.
Well, your tagline there's quite accurate, Paul John, lazy narrative, because it's this reporting of us and the description of us as some sort of homogenous blob. Basically some sort of prehistoric bit of, sponge that can't be separated. It's absolute rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
So he's pointing out the obvious, but the press have got so used to it, and I think that's what's infected the managers, because it's easy then for the managers to deflect. The press, obviously this went into overdrive in 2012, and from then onwards this went into overdrive because certain clubs obviously want to be associated with success, want to bathe in the light of the successful brand of other clubs. So that has gone into overdrive in the last sort of 10 years. And the press obviously not just went along with it, they created that narrative to a large extent because there's a lot of inherent bias with their team, and their team, they want their team not to be looked at as any lesser. So that's just carried on, and what that does is give the managers and all the other managers just an immediate out when they're in these interviews to say, no, Celtic Rangers, Celtic Rangers, Celtic Rangers, Rangers Celtic, and it's very much as Ange says. I mean, when we went into Europe, you're looking at Madrid, and you don't sit there and you're looking at Shakhtar. You're not sitting there going, all these pot 4 teams are, all these pot 3 teams are, why do we even bother? Mm-hmm. What you're looking at is how are they playing? What's their current form like? What fixtures do they have coming up? What's their injury list like? What's their incentive to beat us at this stage in the season? What attitude can we expect from them? All of these things, which are critical. And there's plenty of times this season we've had injuries that could have really impacted a game, and to just immediately say Celtic Rangers, it's an inherent nonsense that shouldn't need to be pointed out. But the fact that it is pointed out, you will see no difference at all. That is just going to carry on because it is easy, it's lazy, and it just lets them constantly feed on this. It's the opposite, it's something like almost like, you can see why the SFA, for instance, would promote something like that, because they can then just go and sell this homogenous blob, as we're talking about. Here you are, this is what, buy this, that's fine, and not worry about the rest of it. But then that goes back to the point about the tickets. I mean, that's just why that's such a nonsense. It's why it's such a poor, the governance of our game is absolutely tragically bad. At that level, I'm not sure there are many other FAs which are as incompetent as ours. But back to Ange's comments. It must frustrate the life out of him that these things are so obvious, and he's got to sit there and I suspect Ange's temperament and my own aren't that far apart, and it must be very, very difficult for the man to keep it calm when faced with this just lazy, what about yourself and Rangers, what about this and Rangers? What have they got to do with us? They play a completely different way, completely different set of players, completely different vision, completely different strategy, and it's got nothing to do with us. You might as well look. I mean, if they're lumping us in with Real Madrid, I can understand why Rangers don't complain about it, because if they were constantly going Celtic Barcelona, I'd be like, well, okay, fair enough. I'd take that, yeah. So I can see why they take it, but at the end of the day, it's Ange was right to call it out, and it is very, very enjoyable that we have a manager who may not know his way around Glasgow as other managers have known, but is able to see the clear nonsense as you say, Paul, coming in from the outside, just looking at this going, what is this?
I know.
What is this conversation? What is this narrative? How does this make sense in anybody's head?
He spotted that from day one, didn't he? He was clued up with it straight away. I mean, even for his first press conference, to the times when he was getting told he was getting sacked by Christmas after a 1-1 draw with Dundee United, he spotted the narrative straight away, and he knew it, and he called it out, and he was never done calling it out. And it was brilliant listening to that as a Celtic fan. It was excellent just watching one of the managers. I've not seen anything like that probably since the Gordon Strachan days, where where a manager called it the media like the way he does. It's brilliant, and he's very clever in the way he does it.
I think remember where I think he was in an airport and we're coming back from the game against Midtjylland. I think that's where he basically stopped the reporter in his tracks. What was the word he used? Catastrophe, I think it was. Is that right? Or catastrophic defeat?
Something like that. Yep.
And he's pinpointed from there, and I don't think he stopped, because he never stops, as we've been told. Listen, before I get back onto some of the comments, I'm going to talk a wee bit, and I'll be allowed to, because this is Celtic records, man. This is Celtic music, and that is what the Glory and the Dream is all about. Now, many of you will be familiar with that record. That was in our house for years and years growing up. And it's interesting when you look at some of the songs that made it onto the holy ground of Glasgow Celtic, champions of Europe, 1966-67. Songs like Hail, Hail, the Celts Are Here, the Johnny Thompson song, and various others, let's just say. The Celtic song, Sean South makes it onto that as well. So that was a record that certainly was in my house growing up. And another one came out, Double Champions 1970-71. Now, there's loads of other Celtic records out there, but this is the one, John, that I mentioned to you at the weekend there. And yeah, thanks everybody for being involved in the weekend, or Paddy and John included in that. It's been a great success so far, but we're keeping it running. And this was a single that was released on Scotia Records, and it's Celts Are Here. Now, I don't know if it came with a cover, but a lot of the times what happens is we just end up with the wee inside sleeve. 1970, Celts Are Here, sung by the Celtic first team squad. And then on the flip side, the vocal was by Jimmy Johnston, and it's a song called Passing Time. So there's a few records that are in the studio, and obviously we're adding to the songbook with The Glory and the Dream. I will be playing it to you because we've dropped from 16 to, at the last check, 39 in the charts. And we're hoping that as the week progresses and it gets played at Celtic Park tonight and hopefully on Saturday, that there is another wee, a wee spike in downloads. If you want to support the charity, you can download the song. The link is underneath this video. Any of you guys have any of the records I just showed on the screen there?
Oh. I don't know. I'm afraid I don't have any records at all anymore, Paul. I'm not. I wouldn't be big into my music the same way that you guys are, so I can't claim to. In fact, most of the records I've seen recently, my mother still has them because she hasn't been able to. She get left with them when we all moved out, and now she has a collection that's probably worth a few quid, to be fair. And my missus does have a record player up the stairs, but I can't say I've used it much. No, I get most of my Celtic content. I just have a very long playlist on Spotify, basically. To which The Glory and the Dream is now the number one contributor.
Superb. Superb. I love to hear that. I mean, fairly recently there was a song came out by Kevin Miles, Paddy. You'll remember, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago now, and we got Kevin in to do a session in the toll booth in Stirling. And I remember how refreshing that particular song was, because you would buy a Celtic song, you would help a cause, which he was at the time. It was a foundation, but it was a right good song, and it was a really, really good accompanying video as well. And in many ways, it's probably been part of the inspiration for us doing this. So big shout out to Kevin, who's a lovely fella as well. And you just hope that The Glory and the Dream can find its way into that Celtic songbook, Paddy. And it'll feel great, actually. I'm taking the wee boy to the game on Saturday, and he already knows the lyrics. So it'll feel great once that comes across on the tannoy. And imagine it got into the top 40. The ambition for us is to have it in the top 40 by Sunday. right? It's in there now. It's been up and down, and obviously with some of the greats passing in the last few days, there's more attention on the likes of a lot of the special songs are in the charts at the moment, which is just quite right. But how amazing would it be, Paddy, to get into the top 40 and raise loads of money for St Mary's?
Oh, it'd be incredible. It would just be the ultimate. I mean, I think you'll make it. I think you'll get there. It's a great tune. We promoted it yesterday on the site. Wrote an article about it and sent it out. I love it, and it would be some achievement to the fact you're in there now is incredible. So
Yes.
Fingers crossed that we can see it there on Sunday. And we've got it in loop in this house as well. So it's great.
I'm like the world's biggest, ugliest groupie because I'm so excited about it. It's just been even sort of slight association, very arm's length association with it. And if my only contribution is to be the Twitter hype man, I'm happy with that. I would absolutely love to see it get into that top 40 or go higher. I mean, honestly, when it was at 16, you were going, just Mariah Carey's past it anyway, let's face it. Do you know what I mean? So it was fantastic to see that, absolutely fantastic.
That was unbelievable, yeah.
You know? And Ed Sheeran, a mere amateur compared to us, you know. So, no, that was brilliant to see, and I hope it continues. I hope everyone doesn't just download it, they keep on looping it on Spotify. Every 30-second play counts. The wee loop buttons on the right hand side underneath the time, 3:21 is the time of the song. There's a wee loop button there. If you can't see it, as I couldn't see it, it means your Spotify's in car mode. So change it from car mode and just have it look there in the background and keep playing it, folks.
Great hack, superb hack. Yeah, and we might need a wee last minute. We might need a wee Jamesy Forrest flick onto McGregor to get it back up the charts, and I'm sure you will oblige. There's been quite a lot of speculation, something else that Ange spoke about recently in his press conference. But what's interested me a little bit, because if I think back a few weeks ago, he spoke about bringing in a couple, which we've done. We know who the couple are. There's another discussion to be had around whether or not we need another striker, of course. I'm pretty sure there's a few people, if we are able to get them in the door and it's a Matt O'Reilly scenario, I know he doesn't play up front, but that scenario, then we'll take them on board. But quite a few of our players are now garnering the attention from others. Now, you mentioned about being compared to Barcelona. Barcelona have been thrown into the mix. I'll come to yourself first, Paddy. In relation to Juranovic, we've also got teams interested in Johnny Kenny, who came over highly rated from Sligo Rovers. Stephen Welsh has had interest, but also Boston Lawal and Ewan O'Toole. Yep. Now, I only know a little bit about O'Toole due to the fact that the Clyde boys used to come onto our channel, and every week, when he was on loan at Clyde, he was getting rave reviews there, and he's obviously continued his development. But our young players, and I know that Lawal came in and we signed him and we paid money for him, our young players are getting interest as well, and they're getting interest from good, solid clubs all across Europe. What does that say about us, Paddy? Does it basically say that we do have the talent there, but we're still struggling to find that pathway? Or, I mean, when I'm looking at some of these guys, they're not, for me, obviously Juranovic aside, they're not going to get into this first 11 unless there's an injury crisis. Well,
they're not, and we kind of were messaging back and forth last night about this, and I basically said that if we're serious about bringing through talent, we need to, as a whole, stop loaning players in. I think if we are serious about bringing somebody through like Ewan O'Toole or Boston Lawal, we should send Moritz Gents back to his parent club in the summer and have these guys sit on the bench or give them a try. But the problem we've got is we've also got Kobayashi, who's been signed, and now you'll find that Stephen Welsh as well is not getting the game time. So what's going to happen with him? Is he going to get loaned out? Is he going to get sold? A lot of speculation about him attracting attention from the likes of Roma and Torino in January. But the also problem we've got is young Eto'o, he's at a contract in the summer, so he could potentially leave for free, sign a pre-contract with someone else and go for free. So I don't know the answer to that. If I'm honest, we've not seen a player come through since Kieran Tierney. and it looks like we're not going to see it for a while yet. I think the person closest to it was young Ben Doak before he was picked up by Liverpool. And Ange tried to persuade him to stay. Ange tried to get him to stay, give him a taste of first-team football, even put him in the derby. But I think by then, the ship had sailed for the young guy. And the minute Liverpool came calling, he was convinced. And I think we're going to see more of that come the summer, unless there's a change in tact. We stop loaning players in and we just blood our own youngsters through.
There's a couple of things in that, Paddy, that I would expand on, because I don't think we have been particularly good in the loan market, bringing players in until recently. And then you look at what we did with Maeda and Jota and Carter Vickers. But then on the flip side of that, if Ben Doak was a legacy issue that Ange tried his best to solve, and I think that was the case. He did. He tried his utmost to show the kid that you could play first team football here. He played in that game you were talking about in February. Yeah. He came on in that game. I just think Ange has come late to this party, and he's doing everything he can to try and put things in place to show the young players that you do have a future here at Celtic Park. But his so-called reserve team or the coach team are sitting in the fifth tier of Scottish football. That's not his fault. I mean, these developments took so long. And Ben Doak, imagine Ben Doak had a conversation with Ange and said to him, right, okay, so you might bring, Giakoumakis is fit and Kyogo's fit and they're playing brilliant and they're scoring goals, and I'm not getting game time, what happens to me then? And the answer is, you'll play for the B team. And really, in the fifth year of Scottish football. So you can understand, but it must be so frustrating, John, for Ange, because it is a legacy issue, and it's going to be very difficult for him to convince the likes of O2, even Lowell, who's had a wee bit of first-team experience, although not competitively, to stay at the club.
Well, the major problem, obviously, first and foremost, there's the issue of just managing stock, basically. Not every player is going to play for us, no matter how promising they are, because there's no guarantee they're going to make it. It just it doesn't suit the club at the time, doesn't suit the player at the time. Timing is a big thing. So there's a lot of these young players who won't get the chance, and that's just the nature of the game. The likes of Ben Doak, that's an unfixable problem. For us, that's not a problem that we're ever going to be able to solve, because quite frankly, as that boy's going on to show, he's not going to sign for it. Make him through at 16, he's gone. And anyone of that ilk is gone, and there's nothing that we can do about that contract-wise, to my knowledge, because I don't think you can tie them down until later, and they're a bit older. So there is that. The second issue is something that I think we've spoken about before. I have no idea what the point of the B team is. No idea at all. I don't know why it's there. If you want to have the kids, and I mean kids, in that team, then that's fine. But for me, if you're going to have the likes of Lowell and Vata and so on stepping up, those boys need to be out on loan. Mm-hmm. They need to be out on loan at other Scottish clubs at least. They need to be out on loan doing something for their development, because where they are is, how does Lowell make that jump? He comes in a couple of games and he looks great, he looks composed, all the rest of it, but he's not under pressure really. But he looks as if he could be a really, really good player. But now there's why would you punt Stephen Welsh to bring in Lowell? Why would you punt Kobayashi to bring in Lowell? Yeah. And Starfelt and Carter Vickers are your main choice, and we've still got the issue of Jens. What do we do with him? So he's got to be looking at that thinking, how am I ever going to make the step up from the fifth tier into this first team and seriously break through? We have a serious problem with that gap, because there is no pathway. I don't care what you say. You're talking about pathways. All we can see, someone was pointing out the other day, Lowell's been on the bench a couple of times recently, and it smacks of the situation with Doak before, where we were desperately trying to give him, minutes.
It's like a token gesture, isn't it?
It's totally. Look, son, you're nearly there. You're nearly there. Just hang on. And it really does smack of a bit of desperation, because there is no, we talk about pathways, the coaches talk about pathways. That is not a pathway. In the middle of it might be a pathway, but in the middle of that pathway, there's a chasm which is almost unbridgeable.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Until we can find a way to go over that chasm, then these boys do not realistically have a chance of making it, which means for me, the B team is a complete waste of resources. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of resources. And I don't see how we benefit from it. And we must have something else in place. Now, I appreciate that this is not just a Celtic situation. There's an issue across the board. We can't just play against ourselves. But these guys, anyone who looks as if they are making that step from the B team to the first team needs to be out on loan straight away at the moment, because there's no bridge in between. So they need to be out. They need to be gone. They need to be down the road, and we need to see what they're made of, because there's no other way to do it. It's just I can't understand. It's that sort of thing before. I'm just looking at the narrative of the homogenous blob and thinking this is nonsense. Surely you've got to be looking at that situation and think, this is nonsense as well. That's not a situation of his making either. He's got to be looking at that thinking, what point is this? Because if we can see it, he can see it.
Without a doubt, John. There's going to come a time, and it'll take a few years before we know who made it and who didn't. But there's going to be a time where we look at a group of players who are probably, I think, already 12 strong, who were at Celtic, who left Celtic, and who at this moment are developing elsewhere. And we know the two boys at Bayern Munich are in amongst that group. Leo Held, who, we did buy in as a young player, but, we'll let him go and he's away to Leeds. And we've had a whole host of them, Angelini, Doak, and I think the last time I looked at the list, there was a whole team, there was a whole side of these youngsters that we can't offer the platform to. They go elsewhere. Some of them won't make it, we get that, but it's going to be an interesting group to look at, the likes of Ben Doak and his contemporaries that have left Celtic, and just what they achieve in the game. And then it'll be a frustration for the fans. It'll be a frustration for whoever's in charge of Celtic that we don't have the talent. I think all you need to do, even if you were to go back in the last 20 years and look at who's graduated from the academy to the first team squad, and every year there's 4 or 5 who graduate from the academy to the first team squad, and how many games did they play and where did their careers go? And you do focus on the success stories of the likes of Aidan McGeady and Kieran Tierney, and those that are in the team right now, Ralston included, Forrest, McGregor. But over a 20-year period, it's not good enough, and it hasn't been for many, many years. And it's probably really ambitious to think that Ange is going to be the one to solve it, because the lifespan of a manager at Celtic, if you look at that as well, isn't 10, 15, 20 years as it was in the early part of Celtic's history. So there's probably not time to sort it out within one managerial tenure either, John.
Well, I did an analysis on this for a previous show, and effectively what it showed was, if you go back to the sort of mid-90s, say, the people that have come through our system and what it's cost us to run that, effectively we've broken even. And we've broken even, including a generational transfer with Tierney. So if it wasn't for that 25 million, we'd be in the hole some considerable degree with what our youth team and academy setup has produced for us. So there is obviously a structural problem, which is why you have to have a functioning football department and someone like Ange who has a vision and a strategy for that. Ange can't fix all of our ills. He can't solve everything. He's not a miracle worker. He's already working miracles with it, but he can't do it everywhere. This is an issue for the club, and the problem is, you've got people behind the scenes there, and this is where you go back to the boardroom structures and so on. You've got people beside the scenes there that are just too comfortable, too easy, and they're not incentivized enough to deal with this problem. It's sort of enough to have it there. Let's just have this thing there and let's hope for the best. There doesn't appear to be a coherent vision for it. Because if we did have a vision for it, we would never have agreed to this fifth tier of football situation. We would have been looking for something else, even if they play less but play a lot of European games with similar size clubs. Anything at all, bounce games against better clubs. It doesn't matter what it is, but this is pointless. And you can't expect Ange to have really anything to do with that, quite frankly, because We know he won't be there in the long term, so it's not his issue. But it hasn't been dealt with. So it's a failure, of the club to deal with over the last 20 plus years, nearly 30 years, as a matter of fact, if not longer. And it's difficult to see who's going to deal with it now, because all we've really been doing is rearranging the deck chairs in terms of the people involved. So, who's going to take that on board? So, do we have a football department which would be, where people have been appointed to essentially deal with the long-term strategy here? Because unless someone is doing that, it's never going to resolve itself. And we need to be as creative, we need to be as insightful, we need to be as sort of almost revolutionary in our thinking as Ange has been, in terms of coming in and shaking things up and changing them. We need a different approach. What do they say? Is a true sign of madness? They're repeating the same thing. Expecting a different results. Well, that's all we're doing. We're just repeating the same thing, expecting a different result. So technically, there you are. It's madness.
But John, you just... What did you call it, John? Testicular fortitude behind the scenes to grab it and change it. Until we get that, I don't think it's ever going to change, which is a shame when you look at the talent we do seemingly have at the B team level. But
exactly, they're being produced. This is the frustration. They're being produced and often going elsewhere. Absolutely great points. I'm going to bring in some comments before we have a roundup of Livingston tonight. There will obviously be the pre-match before then. Kevin McCluskey and Lawrence will be looking at the lineups and the potential outcomes of that game. They'll also be on at half-time and full-time. We've got FS Wood, who would play Abada before Maeda tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened this evening, for sure. Paddy, can you see any other changes in the starting lineup from the game against Aberdeen?
I think we'll definitely see Abada in today. The fact that Ange mentioned it in his press conference yesterday, why he made the change. We're going to have that same situation tonight, aren't we? At home against Livingston, we're going to be faced with probably two buses parked behind the ball. And I think we might even see Giakoumakis instead of Kyogo, just to give us that wee bit of dimension up front, a different kind of dimension.
Well, can I just say, I wouldn't want to see Abada. He did a great job at the weekend, and he brought that sort of dynamism going past him, which was much necessary. But I would be starting Abada off the bench. The player I want to see back is Haksabanovic. So apparently he is back and fit for this game. So I'd be having Haksabanovic and Jota and Kyogo. I know Kyogo didn't play well the other day, but we can go into the stats about it, but essentially he's underperforming a bit this season. So is Giakoumakis underperforming this season. Giakoumakis might be better suited to this sort of game, but I want Haksabanovic, because I think that's the kind of creativity you need in your team to break down these packed defences. That's what you need. And Abada, for all his pace and direct running, doesn't really beat a man without someone else making the pass. So he's not as tricky as Haksabanovic. He's not as creative as Haksabanovic, in my view. That's my opinion.
It's a good point. I think Ralston helps him quite a fair bit Abada, doesn't he, John?
Yes, very much. It is proved by the pass of the game the other day with Ralston. Ralston's passing is really quite something, so he is very much helped down that side. But again, with these guys, the difference, what you're trying to do is avoid them packing the defence and doing what we said earlier, making a £1 million player the equivalent of a £5 million player by packing it so much they can't do anything. So we need our most creative brains on the pitch. For me, those two creative brains are Haksabanovic and Jota.
I'd love to see Haksabanovic. I think he'll be a big player for us in the second half. Danielle agrees with yourself, Paddy, in relation to Giakoumakis. Some thought he would have been a good addition against Aberdeen. We are going to leave you with a song. Of course we are. It's The Glory and the Dream. We want to push it back up the charts. If you can stream it, as John quite rightly said, get it streaming, get it on repeat. because that's what I'm doing in the studio. But if you want to download it, I think the download equates to something like 150 streams or plays on the streaming services. We are raising cash for St Mary's, which is the birthplace of Celtic. There is a video on our channel all around last year's fundraising efforts with St Mary's, and it's brilliant to see Karen and Tom talking about the impact that all you guys and girls had on the chapel, on the birthplace of Celtic. So if you've not seen that, dig it out on our YouTube channel, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so as well. It's growing rapidly as the Acsom YouTube. But here is the Wakes, or here are rather the Wakes in Carley Connor with The Glory and the Dream.
Hail, hail.
Over a century has passed since we first began our journey, across the sea to find the glory and the dream. Just a Taylor and a Joiner and a brother built our team. Greeted sometimes with hostility, but more often with the light. The boys who rise and had to clear through troubled skies. After constant days of struggle, they arrived in paradise. This feels like heaven. This must be the dream. This feels like paradise. The best we've ever seen. The best we've ever seen. Even through the lean years, our support would flock in thousands. Countless trophies stand displayed for all to view. By side, brothers, sisters, we're united, and our children do the same. This feels like heaven. This must be the dream. This feels like paradise. The best we've ever seen. The best we've ever seen. The above club was formed in November 1887 by a number of Catholics in the East End of the city. The main objective of the club is to supply the East End conferences of the St Vincent de Paul Society to support those in the missions of St Mary's, Sacred Heart and St Michael's. Many cases of sheer poverty are left unaided through lack of means. A football club will be formed for the maintenance of the dinner tables of our needy children.